Hi, and welcome to SF Live. I'm your host, Christina Marie Flores. Please help me welcome the Executive Director of Bayview HuntersPoint Foundation and Community Improvement, Jacob Moody. Welcome, Jacob.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So please tell us a little bit about what it is that the Bayview HuntersPoint Foundation of Community Improvement does encompass.
Three things. One is we provide methadone treatment for heroin addicts. We do community mental health, and we provide youth services which are focused on substance abuse treatment and prevention, and we do pre-adjudication and post-adjudication programs for young people who are caught up in the juvenile justice system.
Well, that encompasses quite a lot of things. So let's break this down and take this one step at a time. The substance abuse. Now you're talking about methadone. I don't believe that a lot of people know exactly what it is that it does, if it's a substitution for heroin, how that helps, how you can function on that. Could you explain that to us?
I'll try.
Okay.
No pressure. As best I possibly can.
Okay.
Methadone is a substitutional drug. It's used to help move people from the illegal use of heroin and all the accoutrements from that surround that to a program that assists them in dealing with the physical symptomatology of addiction, as well as helping them through counseling to get to the point where we hope they are completely detoxed from any drug and are living clean and sober lives.
And this is mostly dealing with heroin abuse. Now, what about...
It's all heroin abuse. Methadone is for heroin abuse.
And how about crack cocaine? Is that still something that's very, very invasive in that area, or is that something that is now turned into heroin? I'm not...
That's a good question. There is still a significant amount of stimulant use in Bayview. If you talk to my friend Mark Galley, who's the medical director at Southeast Health Center, he'll indicate to you that a lot of the negative health effects that he sees manifested in the lives of folks in Bayview have to do with stimulant use. It's still an issue. It's probably not as big an issue as it was in the 80s. But, you know, it's still around.
Speaking of the 80s and the 70s, because I've been around for a long time here myself, I'm a San Francisco native, and I've spent very little time in Hunters Point, Bayview area. It's so distant to a lot of people that live in San Francisco that they really don't know what the community's like, nor what it's gone through and the challenges that it's faced. Could you take us through a little trip back in time to kind of explain what it was like and explain your first quote, you know, where you had people that are not just African American. There were many different ethnicities that called the Bayview their home and still do.
Yeah, it's a very mixed neighborhood, actually. There about 48% African Americans, and then Latinos and Asians kind of fill in the rest of that right now. Well, historically, you're absolutely correct when you talk about not going there. The Southeast has been isolated from the rest of San Francisco for a long period of time. That worked to the advantage of that part of town when the shipyard was there. It helped with security and all those kinds of things. But in reality, it's a place where not very many San Franciscans go, and that's unfortunate because it's got some of the best weather, some most interesting people live there. It was when redevelopment hit Fillmore in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a movement of folks out of the Fillmore into Bayview Hunters Point. And there was an expectation when they moved there that even though the promise of redevelopment in their lives was lost in the Fillmore, that it was going to happen in Bayview Hunters Point. But
even though the government with eminent domain actually pretty much stole the properties from, or took them at a very, very cut price, and a lot of people who had built their lives in the Fillmore were resentful. They must have been resentful.
Well, that still goes on. That resentment is still today. The right of return is still being debated, and most recently, just a couple of months ago, at the Board of Supervisors. So these issues are still very much alive. In Bayview, redevelopment issues are still very much alive. What's going to happen with the shipyard? What's going to happen with where Candlestick Park is right now? The plan is to build 40,000 new homes in Bayview. The Bayview is a community that has been in transition for years. Even though there's a very stable group of people that are there, it has the highest percentage of owner-occupied homes in San Francisco.
That was amazing. I never realized that. I just heard that recently.
Yeah.
And so it has deep roots, and it has family, and it has people that are true San Franciscans, generation after generation, that live in that area.
Absolutely. But it has been home to a lot of different folks. There was a thriving Chinese fishing community there at one point. At one point in time, there were dairies in Bayview HuntersPoint. It was the food locker for San Francisco. It was Butcher Town for a while.
Really?
You know?
Okay.
So it's been a location for a variety of different things going on in the city that helped feed and nurture the whole city. The power plant was located there. Thank God it's gone. Yeah. Even in the midst of that, there were families that have spent generation after generation in the Bayview, and there is a culture in the Bayview that is very vibrant and wonderful to engage in. There's still some of those elders around who fought those early battles around civil rights and in early battles around redevelopment. I think the struggle right now is that as we see declining numbers, and there are declining numbers of African Americans in San Francisco and in the Bayview as well, how does one maintain influence when one doesn't have large numbers? And how do you do that? And one of the ways you do that is through organization. And there are quite a few organizations in the Bayview that are working very diligently to reinvigorate a community voice and help the community move positively and powerfully into the future.
That's wonderful. And I would, to backtrack just a bit, I would be worried. I would think that people who had been through the whole fiasco where they had to move in the eminent domain and seizing the properties and promise something that was not given to them might be a little bit nervous with all the new building going on to see if they are actually really going to be having a chance to get into those buildings and housing.
You've raised a very important point. I think that what's happening in San Francisco Housing Authority housing right now, as the HOPE San Francisco program moves forward, raises a lot of questions about who will be able to return to the new housing. What do you do with a tenant who is significantly behind in their rent? How, and that's not just a fault of the tenant, but a fault of the San Francisco Housing Authority as well, which they acknowledge. So as you go about this task of rehabilitating these homes, how do you make sure that the people who lived through all the horrible stuff get a chance to come back? That's still being debated right now. Or you can look at the T line. It's a wonderful line. It's a light rail.
The light rail, just in case someone doesn't know what we're talking about, it's the 3rd Street light rail that had promised for a long, long time and now is here. Right. But you bring a question up.
Well, it's not the 15, and the 15 bus was a great bus. I mean, and it's not the 15. And you know, there's some conversations in the community about, is the T line for the people who live there now, or is it for the people who are going to live in the 40,000 new homes that are coming? And those are struggles. One of the ways that we get involved in this, our mental health program, our community mental health program, is that one of the things that's true in the Bayview right now is that there's a lot of trauma and grief. Everybody has been touched by trauma. Everybody has been touched by grief. Everyone knows someone who has been killed. Everyone knows someone who has been evicted. Everyone knows someone who has lost their job. When we just look at what's, some of the social realities in the Bayview right now, you really see a people talk about it in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder, but it's not post, it's current trauma and current grief.